John Sayles is here. He is a filmmaker of enormous respect among people who love film. He is a storyteller. He's a former MacArthur Award winner. His newest film is called The Secret of Roan Inish, and I am pleased to have him back at this desk. Welcome.
Nice
Great
to
to have you here. Tell me why you wanted to tell this story. Before we began, it's under that sort of genre that Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, and others call magic realism, which is what?
Well, I think that magic realism has to do with telling a story that's not literally true. It's not literally possible. It may have elements of fantasy to it, but it actually gets to deeper truths than you might by documentary means.
Yeah, and this story?
This story, a couple things. It's based on a children's novella by Rosalie Fry. And one of the things about this story is that it's a very my first un-American movie.
Yeah.
It's in a way, even though it wasn't set originally in Ireland, it's set in Scotland in the book. It's a very Irish story in that it's about people leaving an island.
Yeah.
And so few American stories are about leaving. They're about coming here. They're about doing well, moving up in the classes. And so many Irish stories and songs and plays are about leaving and the sadness of that and what you pay to leave, but also what you pay if you stay, which is a much harder life.
Yeah. And how did you become attracted to it? I mean, how did you know about it?
Maggie Renzi, who I live with and who's produced many of my movies, read it when she was a 10-year-old girl, and in that the protagonist is a 10-year-old girl.
Fiona.
Fiona was one of her favorite books, and she came upon it maybe 20 years later in a library sale where they were just clearing the shelves. Yeah. And she said, "Oh my God, that's my book. That's the very copy that I read. I have to buy it." Looked at it, liked the story again, brought it to me, and I said, "You know, this is a really good story. It was just a good story."
And will appeal to children as well?
Yeah, I think of it as a movie kind of like the pre-Disney Haley Mills movies, or what was the one, To Kill a Mockingbird, which is not necessarily a children's movie, but I saw To Kill a Mockingbird when I was about 10 years old.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
And I got into it because there was a kid who brought me into that story.
Right, and so the same thing will happen here with a 10-year-old.
Yeah, but an adult can go without worrying about their insulin level.
Yeah. Can you put this in the context of all the things you've done, whether it's Manawan or whether it's 8 Men Out?
I'd say the movie that I've done that it's the closest to is Brother from Another Planet, in that there is a fantastic element to it, but there is a core of realism, and that the fantasy in a way is a way into the realism.
Yeah, and Joe Morton's back in this.
Yeah, he's Irish.
Yeah.
But I do think that one of the interesting things for me about it is there's so much storytelling, oral storytelling in The Secret of Roan Inish. And I got thinking about what is it about an oral tradition that is interesting that we don't really have in this country anymore.
And what is it?
There is an unbroken chain. Somebody tells somebody who tells somebody who tells somebody. So the story is not just a story, it's also a link with who you are in the world.
But did we have it in the South in terms of African Americans?
I think that Native Americans had it, African Americans, but it got squeezed till it almost died out. And to a certain extent, it gets supplanted by media culture. And media culture is manufactured stories, and it's so hard to keep something that organic alive against media culture. Not that media culture is all bad or anything like that, but it's a very, very different thing, and the rhythm of it is very, very different. I think it's a very strange thing to look to, network television to figure out who you are in the world. Whereas if your grandparents are telling you a story that happened to their grandparents, that has a much more organic thing to do with who you are than the Brady Bunch.
Yeah. Well, interesting, the Brady Bunch, but I mean, I just read where they're doing some new movie about the Brady Bunch or something. Yeah.
And that is common culture for a lot of people.
It is. I mean, it is, and I think that is the reason that so many of everybody. I mean, I saw where Michael Eisner was saying they're doing Pocahontas or something. I mean, there is this sense of so much of our culture today is regenerating. Whether it's popular culture or classics. In a sense.
There's a moment in a novel that I wrote, Union Dues, where there are these two working class kids who have wandered into a very radical group where most of the radicals are upper middle class kids, and they say, oh, we've got 2 working class kids, let's put them in a room together, and they'll compare notes and, you know, kind of create solidarity. And the 2 kids kind of look at each other and they start talking about old Twilight Zone episodes they've seen.
Yeah.
That is their shared culture.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not labor history.
Yeah. Take a look at this. Set this up. This is a Selkie story. Set this clip up for
Yeah,
us.
this is a story told by a very strange cousin of Fiona's, who's one of the dark ones. One of the every generation there's a dark one in the family, and he's telling the story of the relation of the family to the seals themselves, which is through this Selkie creature, which is a mythical creature from Irish and Scots folklore that's half seal and half woman.
Roll tape. Here it is. Is this the first film you? I think I was just trying to think whether this is the first film you've done that deals with the elements. You know.
Place has been very important in my other movies. Certainly Passion Fish, Louisiana, and The Bayou was very important. But it's certainly the first movie where nature has had a consciousness. In this movie, nature, the seals and the gulls and the sea and the clouds conspire to steal this little boy away from this family so that they'll hold up their end of the bargain.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. How that sort of that.
And I think fisher people who live off the land, have a sensitivity to it. Many of their stories are about storms or weather or geological, whether
and how
it's a
they
volcano.
mark time.
How they mark time. That was the winter of the Great Frost or whatever. But also just, even though they're tales and they're entertaining, they're also very practical.
Yeah.
So if you're a kid and you've heard that story and you see a certain climatic condition in the sky, you say, oh, I got to get off the water. I've heard this story.
Do you, now that you've made what is it, how many, 8, 9? How many
9 movies.
9 movies.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a pattern for you? Is there direction for you? I mean...
Yeah, but it isn't so much a career move kind of direction. It's how do we keep doing stuff that I'm interested in doing with the kind of control that I'd like to have over them, so that the movie turns out the way that we want them to turn out. So thematically, no. I mean, the next movie I'm making is in Texas on the Mexican-Texan border. Has really nothing to do with this one.
What's it about?
It's about a sheriff who's trying to solve a murder that was committed 37 years earlier that may have been committed by his father when he was the sheriff. And it gets into that strange thing of a border.
And who brought you that film?
I basically, that's kind of, you know, I just was thinking about borders for a long time, and I wanted a story that gets into that strange thing about what do we do with history? What does history mean to individuals, whether it's racial history, ethnic history, country history? When do you say, okay, yeah, that was then, this is now, I start from scratch, or is that possible?
Yeah. I mean, what interests me about you, John, I mean, you and I once did a long, long conversation, as you may remember, for Night Watch when I was doing it, and we talked about your political philosophy, and you talked about a lot of these ideas. It is that, in a sense, you seem to be moved not by commercialism, hardly at all. I mean, you just want to make those movies about those things that turn you on. Yes?
And yeah, I'd say that's true, but also I was a actor and writer before I was a filmmaker.
Right.
I wasn't an essayist. I wasn't a political scientist or anything like that. So it's always in story terms. That's how I understand things the best. If you can make a story about something well, I'll learn from it. And so there's also that part of me that says, oh, this not only is about things that I'm interested, larger human and political issues, but it's a great story.
But you keep it small, in a sense. What was the budget of this film?
This is about $5 million,
No,
a
see,
little
that's
under
small.
5.
I mean, that's clearly small. Do you keep it small because it gives you control, or do you keep it small because of some other reason?
Yeah, well, it's, I keep it small because nobody's offering me lots of money and lots of control.
Well, obviously, that's my next question.
But also, I prefer to work fast. I prefer not to have the actors have to go into their trailers for 2 weeks before the next setup. They stay in character better. The crew has more effort, the more energy. I also think that if you cannot be carrying this piano on your back of pressure, money pressure especially, the movie can kind of develop at its own rate, and you don't have to worry that everybody in America is going to like it and see it. And that means that you don't have to go toward any lowest common denominator. You can just say, here's the movie, whoever wants to come, I think they'll get something out of it.
Okay, but if you make are you saying that if you make a $5 million movie, then you can pretty much make the movie you want to make, and you're not having to make turns because almost of market studies or focus groups.
Yeah,
or
I think if
this
you
ending plays and that ending doesn't play.
I think if you keep it under 3, you have a better chance. 5 is tricky.
Yeah.
It's
At some point you get to the level where the makers are saying,
yeah,
we got something at
this
stake
movie
here.
happened to be a movie that families will like to go, you
Yeah.
know, and they have to buy tickets for the kids or something like that. You know.
Let's take a look at this. This is the taking of Jamie's cradle. This is what we
Right.
sort of referred to. Take a look at this. Here it is. Well, no, before you take a look, set it up. You set it
Yeah,
up.
this is, as I said, this is a conspiracy of nature.
Right.
The Keneally family, who is the clan, has lived on this island for centuries, and they're finally evacuated. They're the last people, human beings on the island, and they're leaving. And because their blood is mingled with the seals, and they are people who have made a bond with nature, they're breaking the deal.
All right, here it is. Take a look. You were saying as we were watching that, because of pacing, you take a risk that children are not going to be patient because they've been bombarded by MTV and computer technology and everything else that gives them a faster.
Yeah, that particular scene is the fastest scene in the movie as far as cutting is concerned. Many more scenes have the rhythm of a tale.
Yeah.
Somebody sits down, they begin to speak, we begin to see what they're talking about, and their voice may fade out or it may stay on the screen, but I wanted the movie to have a more kind of oral tradition feeling to it. That's a risk, because if kids are used to having everything come at them very, very quickly, it may seem boring at first. Who I think will like this movie the most to begin with will be children who are read to.
Yeah.
Either by their teachers or by their parents, because they'll have some sense of that rhythm already. And they'll say, okay, I get to settle in and relax and listen to this.
Did you go to film because it's in the end the best possible medium to tell a story?
It's not the best possible medium for every story, but what I find is, having been a fiction writer, and I still do write fiction, you have freedom from practical concerns. If you want to do the Bay of Pigs invasion, you can do it in 7 pages, and you don't have to worry about the usual costumer's question of, are we going to see their feet?
Yes.
You know, you don't have to buy the boots or rent the boots. But in fiction, you can do almost anything you want emotionally, factually, but it all goes through the reader's head. And it has to go through their brain first and then turn into emotion. In a movie, you can go here and you can also go viscerally at the same time, right to the gut. So certain stories that need that visceral thing, that will be more alive, and you'll just get people more excited about it through that visceral way. At the same time that there's something to think about, movies are the perfect thing for.
Yeah. It's great to have you back. Secret of Roan Inish, John Sayles. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next time. See you then.